Hello, my lovely fifth graders. Okay, so we're in our second week, at the end of our second week of our review lessons. So your review lesson for today that I'm going to do with you is chapter 6, lesson 5, which is multiplying decimals. So let's take a look. Okay, we're going to jump right into our examples because again, these are all review. So just a reminder about how it works. We'll do a couple problems and then you'll be good to go on your iReady lessons and your reteach. Okay. So this example 1 says, Nina is buying peanuts in bulk. The peanuts cost 75 cents for each pound, and she purchased 2 1/10 pounds of peanuts. How much will Nina pay? So if each pound is 75 cents, that's telling us we need to multiply our 75 cents by the 2 1/10 pounds of peanuts that she bought. Okay, so here is how we need to make sure we remember how to do this. When we are multiplying decimals, we need to make sure we understand how many numbers are behind the decimal. So right here, you can see the notes on the side. It shows you this number, 75 cents, has 2 numbers behind the decimal, and 2 1/10 has 1 number behind the decimal. So what we want to make sure we know is 2 and 1. That means at the end of our problem, after we've solved it, we are going to need 3 numbers total behind the decimal because the 2 and the 1 we add together to get 3 total numbers behind our decimal at the end. After we figure that out, we can ignore the decimals now. We can pretend like they're not even there and we can multiply like we regularly do. So we know we start with the first number all the way to the right on the bottom. So 1 times 5 would give me 5. Then I go over here, 1 times 7 would give me 7. Okay, so I know I need to do a couple things before I move on to my next number. I'm done with the 1, so just to make sure I'm clear on that, I always cross it out. I need to put a placeholder because we're moving on to the second digit in our problem. And then if there were any numbers at the top from us multiplying that 1, we would need to cross those out or erase them, but there's nothing there, so we're okay. Now we can start multiplying by the 2. So remember, we start with the 2 and we always start with the number all the way to the right on that top number. So 2 times 5 would give me 10. Put the 0 down, carry the 1 up. Then I can do 2 times 7, which is 14. 14 plus 1 is 15. So I put the 5 down, bring the 1 up. 2 times 0 is 0, but plus 1 would give me that 1 I need. And then as you can see, we add them together. So I get 5, 7, 5, 1. So without the decimal, this number would be 1,575. But because we counted these decimals before and we figured out we need to have 3 numbers behind the decimal in our answer, you can see that they moved it over so that there are 3 numbers here behind the decimal. So our number is not 1,575. If you know it, say it the proper way with the decimal there. Try it real quick. Okay, so it should be 1 and, because remember we use the word and when we're saying it with a decimal, 1 and 575 thousandths. Okay, there was our first example. So let's look at a couple more. Okay, so we got some more examples here. So these ones are written horizontally. I personally like to solve problems vertically, especially when we're multiplying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them over here. So I'm going to put 6/10. We're doing 6/10 times 8/10. So I'm going to take them both over here and write it vertically for myself. Okay, so the first thing I want to figure out is how many numbers are behind the decimal. In 6/10, I can see the 6 is the only thing behind the decimal, so that's 1 number behind the decimal. And then for 8/10, I can also see that there's just 1 number behind the decimal. So that means in my answer, how many numbers do I need behind my decimal, boys and girls? That's right, I need 2 numbers behind my decimal in the answer. Okay, so I personally like to rewrite it after this without the decimals, but it's up to you. Just make sure you know, after you count the decimals, you do not need to acknowledge them. You can pretend they're not there. So I'm gonna rewrite this without the decimals, and I don't even need the zeros on this. So that means I'm just looking at 6 times 8, which is what, boys and girls? Say it, 48. Okay, so I have 2 numbers here, but I'm not done because I have to remember to put my decimal back where it goes. I need 2 numbers behind my decimal, and because here I only have 2 numbers, that means my decimal goes in the front to make this number 48/100ths. And you can put the decimal in the front. We've learned this year that putting that decimal in the front, you can do it. If you don't do it, it's still the same number. It does not change your answer if there's a 0 there or not in the front of the decimal. Okay, next problem. I want to write it vertically again so I can look at it a little bit better and solve it. So I've got 1 7/10 times 2 4/10. Okay, again, the first thing I do is I count how many numbers are behind the decimal. In 1 7/10, I have one number behind my decimal. And in 2 4/10, I also have one number behind my decimal. So again, just like the problem we just did, that means in my answer, I'm gonna need 2 numbers behind my decimal. And you do not have to do this, but I like to rewrite it without them. So now I'm looking at, instead of 1 7/10 times 2 4/10, I'm simply looking at 17 times 24. Okay, so remember we start with our number to the right on the bottom. 4 times 7 would give me 28. Put my 8 down, my 2 up. 4 times 1 gives me 4, plus 2 more gives me 6. Okay, my 3 steps, I need to cross out the 4. I'm done with the 4. I need to put my placeholder there in my ones place. And then I do have a number here, so I'm going to cross it out, or you can erase it, just to make sure I know I don't want that 2 for my next step that I'm going to do. Okay, now I can look at the 2, and remember I go all the way to the right. 2 times 7 is 14. Put the 4 down. Bring the 1 up here. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. I'm going to add those numbers together now. If I want to put a placeholder here, I can, just so my numbers are balanced. I have 8. 6 plus 4 is 10. 0 goes down, 1 goes up here. And then the 1 plus 0 plus 3 gives me a 4. Okay, so my answer, boys and girls, I hope we know it's not 408, because we still have to put the decimal where it belongs. And we figured out in the beginning that we need 2 numbers behind the decimal. Okay, if I look at this, I'm going to put it right here, because then that gives me a 0 and an 8, which is 2 numbers behind the decimal. So boys and girls, if you know how to say this number, say it right now as I'm writing it. And you should have said 4 and 800ths, because that 8 is in the hundredths place, not the tenths place. Okay, let's look at our next example. Okay, we're getting a little bit bigger numbers here, but that's okay, because that's not going to change the steps that we do. So on this one, we have 96/100ths times 7 1/10. So let's count our decimals first. In 96/100ths, I can see that there are 2 numbers behind the decimal. I have the 9 and the 6 there. And then in 7 1/10, I only have 1 number behind the decimal. I just have that 1 right there. So that means in my answer, I need 3 numbers behind the decimal on that one. So as I did before, I'm going to rewrite the problem without the decimals. So I'm going to look at just 96 times 71. And then I'll look at my decimal and where it goes at the end of my problem. So start with my 1. 1 times 6 is 6. 1 times 9 is 9. I know I need to do those steps before I continue. I cross out my 1, add a 0 down below, and if there were any numbers up here at the top, I would cross those out or erase those. Now I can start again. 7 times 6 is 42. Put the 2 down, put the 4 up. 7 times 9 is 63, plus 4 should give me 67. Okay, I can put those placeholders there if I want, just so all my numbers are nice and lined up with each other. Add those 2 numbers together. 6 plus 0 gives me 6. 9 plus 2 gives me 11. Put my 1 down, my other 1 up here. 1 plus 7 is 8. And 6 plus 0 gives me 6. Okay, so now I just need to figure out where my decimal goes. I need 3 numbers behind the decimal. So if I start over here, I can count 1, 2, 3. Say this number if you know how to say it. You should have said 6 and 816 thousandths. Okay, we got one more example on this page here. So this one looks very similar to the other one. We have 3 6500ths, which shows me that I have 2 numbers behind the decimal there. And 2 6/10 shows me that I have 1 number behind the decimal there. So that means in my answer, how many numbers do I need behind my decimal, boys and girls? I need 3. Okay, I'm going to rewrite it right here without the decimals, because I don't like to get distracted by having those decimals there. I'm just going to look at it as regular whole numbers. So 365 times 26. Start with my 6. 6 times 5, I get 30. Put my 0 down, my 3 up. 6 times 6 gives me 36, plus 3 more would give me 39. 6 times 3 is 18, plus 3 more gives me 21. Okay, I'm done with my 6, so I'm going to cross that out so I know I'm done with it. Add my 0 there as my placeholder, and then I do have some numbers up here. So I'm going to very messily cross those 3's out just so I remember you don't want to use those for this next step. Okay, starting with the 2 all the way to the right, 2 times 5 gives me 10, so I need another 0 there. But now I need a 1 up here. 2 times 6 gives me 12, plus 1 more gets me 13. 1 goes up here again. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 more gives me 7. Okay, now we know we need to add those two numbers together. 0 and 0, hope we know that, gives me 0. 9 plus 0 gives me 9. 1 plus 3 gives me 4. And 7 plus 2 gives me 9. Okay, the last thing I need to do is remind myself up here, I need 3 numbers behind my decimal. I start all the way over here and I look 1, 2, 3. So this can be said 2 ways, because remember, when there's a 0 all the way at the end, we can get rid of it when we're all done with our answer. So this could either be said as 9 and 490 thousandths, or if I got rid of that 0, it would just be 9 and 49 hundredths. Okay, we've got one more set of examples, my loves. So let's look at these last couple examples. Okay, so this one we have 9/10 plus, or sorry, not plus, 9/10 times 3/10. So I'm gonna look, instead of rewriting it twice for myself, I'm gonna look, each one of these has 1 number behind the decimal, oops, which means in my answer, sorry for my parentheses, in my answer, I'm gonna need 2 numbers behind my decimal. So now I'm gonna rewrite it without the decimals, which would give me just 9 times 3. So if I simply did 9 times 3, I should know that it is 27, but my answer is not 27 when I finish. I need to make sure I put that I have 2 numbers behind my decimal. So in order to have 2 numbers behind my decimal, I'm gonna need to put it all the way at the front, and instead of making it 27, we are making it 27 hundredths. That was a quick one because it only had 1 digit after you took away the zeros. Okay, I'm gonna do the same one in this one. So I can see 1 and 6/10 and 3 and 2/10 have 1 decimal behind their, 1 number behind their decimal in each one, which means just like number 10, our answer needs 2 numbers behind the decimal. So now I'm gonna rewrite it as just 16 and 32. Okay, just took the decimals out of those. Okay, I start with my 2. 2 times 6 gives me 12. Put the 2 down, the 1 up. 2 times 1 gives me 2, plus 1 more gives me a 3. I put that 0 placeholder. I cross out my 2 because I'm done multiplying with that, and I get rid of this 1 here. Now I can start with my second number. 3 times 6 gives me 18. Put the 1 on top. 3 times 1 gives me 3, plus 1 more gives me 4. Add those 2 numbers together. Okay, I get 2. 8 plus 3 gives me 11. And then that 4 plus 1 gives me 5. My last step to do, because my answer is not 512, because I need 2 numbers behind the decimal. If I go in 1, 2, my decimal belongs right there. So my answer is not 512, boys and girls. How do I say that properly? Say it to yourself or say it out loud. You should have said 5 and 12 hundredths. That is correct. Okay, so those are our last example problems. So now what you need to do, you're either doing the reteach page, depending on who your teacher is, and then you also need to do your teacher assigned iReady lessons. There are specific lessons for this chapter and lesson that we put up for review for you, so make sure you get all of that done, and we'll see you for the next math lesson.